What brings a young woman like yourself to sit here all by herself in a spot like this?" Autumn Wade's body went rigid. The words crawled across her shoulder like ice, carried on the warm southern breeze that whispered through the withering oak trees of Palm Hollow Park. She hadn't detected their footsteps, only the sudden hush of the wind, as though the very trees were holding their breath in anticipation. Slowly she pivoted, her fingers still marking her place in a well-worn paperback novel. Two uniformed men loomed above her. The first was older, broader, his face weathered by years of sun and skepticism. His companion appeared younger, lanky, fidgeting as if uncertain whether he was witnessing humor or menace. Officer Luke Brenner smiled down at her with predatory satisfaction. His badge caught the fading sunlight. Beside him, Officer Jim Slater refused to meet her gaze. "I'm simply reading," Autumn responded, her voice more controlled than her trembling hands. "I haven't done anything inappropriate." "That depends," Brenner replied, moving closer. "Got identification, darling? Might be loitering, could be surveying the area. You never can tell nowadays." Autumn's eyes widened. "This is public property." "Sure is," he chuckled darkly. Amazing how some people believe public gives them permission to lounge around looking decorative and taking up space. She reached toward her canvas bag, moving with deliberate care. "I can provide ID if necessary." Brenner dismissed the offer with a wave. "No need. I think we'll conduct a visual check instead." Quick as lightning, he flicked his baton against the edge of her dress, lifting the fabric upward. Air met skin. Humiliation flooded through her. The violation lasted barely a heartbeat. Autumn gasped and jerked away, grasping her skirt with both hands, the color draining from her cheeks as her book tumbled to the ground beside her boot. "What is wrong with you?" she cried, her voice fracturing, but not shattering. "You just violated me." "Violated?" Brenner roared with laughter. "Relax, sweetheart. We're just having some entertainment. It's Sunday, after all." Next to him, Officer Slater forced out an uncomfortable laugh before quickly averting his eyes. His throat bobbed nervously. He understood. He knew this had crossed every line. Autumn rose to her feet, not from strength, but from refusal to remain diminished. "You believe you can treat anyone this way?" she demanded, staring directly at Brenner. "You think there won't be consequences?" "Not anyone," Brenner sneered. "Just girls like you?" The words struck like venom on flame. Autumn's thoughts spun, but her heart knew precisely what action to take. She reached for her phone, not shaking, not panicking, moving with quiet determination. She dialed. 2 rings. A familiar voice answered. "Maya, I need your help." Silence stretched across the line, then a single word. "Location? Palm Hollow. The bench by the east playground." "Don't move," came the immediate response. 15 minutes. Autumn ended the call. She avoided Brenner's gaze. She ignored Slater entirely. She settled back onto the bench, smoothed her skirt across her knees, and fixed her stare on the lake, her jaw set, her eyes burning, not with fear but with memory. Because Autumn Wade wasn't simply some quiet young woman in a park. She was someone who, years earlier, had been rescued from an abusive foster situation by a black woman in uniform named Maya Williams. She was someone who had learned that terror only ends when you face it head-on. And she was someone who had spent her entire life preparing to defend herself. In 15 minutes, Justice would emerge from a dusty Dodge Charger with braided hair, mirrored sunglasses, and a badge that still carried meaning. But for now, she waited. Phone gripped, like armor, dignity wrapped around her like tempered steel. The wind continued blowing, but not a single leaf dared to fall. The Dodge Charger sliced through the late afternoon glow like a knife through mist. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the deep, rumbling purr of a V8 engine gliding beneath the Spanish moss that draped low over Palm Hollow's streets. Behind the wheel, Maya Williams remained focused. She knew her destination exactly. 15 minutes. That's what she'd promised Autumn. She was running ahead of schedule. Her uniform was partially on, civilian jacket over a crisp navy shirt, badge secured to her belt. Her boots still carried dust from the volunteer training she'd conducted that morning at the academy. Her tightly braided hair barely moved as she checked her mirrors, but her mind wasn't in the vehicle. It was with a girl who had once stared up at her from the floor of a filthy foster home, eyes holding too much knowledge for someone so young. That was 8 years ago. Back then, Autumn Wade was 12, painfully thin and silent, discovered, huddled beside a broken heater while the man claiming to be her guardian screamed at officers outside. Maya hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't required backup. She'd simply walked in, knelt down, and said, "You don't have to remain here anymore." That moment had stayed with both of them. Now Autumn was grown, but the tremor in her voice during the phone call wasn't something Maya could dismiss, and the words, "He lifted my skirt," had ignited something cold and dangerous in Maya's core. She turned off Chestnut Street and entered Palm Hollow Park through the service gate, avoiding the main parking area. Gravel crunched beneath her tires. Through the trees ahead, she spotted the bench and the girl. Autumn sat motionless, legs pressed together, eyes locked on the lake as if it held solutions. Her book lay abandoned at her feet. 2 officers stood. Nearby, their posture too relaxed, too smug. Maya parked, shut off the engine, and stepped out. She didn't slam the door. She didn't announce herself. She simply walked, and every step sounded like a countdown. When she reached the clearing, she stopped 10 feet from the 2 men. Her voice, when it came, didn't rise. It cut. "Badge numbers. Now." Both officers turned. The older one, Brenner, smirked with clear amusement. "Excuse me?" I said. Maya repeated, enunciating each syllable like steel. "Badge numbers. Name and number immediately." Brenner chuckled. "And who exactly are you, sweetheart?" Maya pulled her ID wallet from her hip and flipped it open. The gold shield of Internal Affairs gleamed. Sergeant Maya Williams. Off-duty, but not off-duty enough. Slater stiffened. "Ma'am, we were just—" "Quiet," Maya said without looking at him. "I'm not addressing you yet." Brenner's grin faltered slightly. "We were investigating a loitering complaint." "Loitering?" Maya said, glancing at Autumn. "She's holding—" "A book, not a weapon." Brenner shrugged. "We had reasonable suspicion." "No, you had opportunity," Maya cut in. "Don't confuse the two." A small crowd had begun gathering near the playground's edge. Parents, joggers, a couple of elderly dog walkers. Phones were already out. Maya took a step forward. "Did you touch her?" Brenner's jaw clenched. "She's fabricating things." "Then you won't object if I review the park surveillance footage, or yours. You are wearing your body cameras, aren't you?" Brenner said nothing. Slater, sweat forming now, mumbled, "Mine's charging back at the station." Maya turned to Autumn for the first time since arriving. "Are you all right?" Autumn nodded, but it was the kind of nod people give when they're suppressing an earthquake. "She didn't cry," someone in the crowd said quietly. "She just sat there, but I witnessed what he did." An older black man wearing a veteran's cap stepped forward. He flipped her dress up with his stick, thought it was amusing. Maya looked at Brenner again. "Badge number." He didn't respond, so she pulled out her phone, opened the voice recorder, and held it up. Let the record show officer refusing to provide identification. Suspected misconduct. Incident time-stamped and witnessed. Still, nothing. Then Autumn stood. She stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear. "His name is Luke Brenner, badge 31478. His partner is James Slater, badge 3952. I memorized them while they laughed." Maya nodded once. "Good." She turned to the crowd. "Anyone who witnessed what happened, please remain. IA officers will arrive within 20 minutes. Your statements matter." Slater looked like he wanted to disappear into the grass. Brenner was seething, jaw clenched so tight a vein bulged in his neck. "Anything else you want to say, Officer Brenner?" He glared. "You're going to regret making this a spectacle." Maya stepped closer, so close he could see his reflection in her aviators. "No," she said. "You'll regret it. I just showed up." Then she turned back to Autumn and said the only thing that mattered, "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in years, Autumn believed it. By the time the second unmarked cruiser arrived, the sun had dropped low enough to turn the lake copper, and the crowd had doubled. People weren't just observing now, they were bearing witness. Maya. Williams stood at the center of it all, calm, anchored, immovable. Her presence wasn't loud. It was substantial, like iron driven deep into the earth. The IA officers emerged from the car, both in civilian clothes but clearly marked by the tension that followed them. One of them, a sharp-eyed Latina named Detective Rowena Fields, approached. "With quick steps and a clipboard, we received the call. I'm mobilized. Who's lead here?" Maya didn't flinch. "Me," Fields nodded. "Witnesses?" "Plenty," Maya replied, nodding toward the semicircle of onlookers forming a silent wall around the scene. "Start with the veteran in the cap. He saw the moment it happened." Fields turned to her partner, murmured instructions, then looked toward Autumn. "You okay to give a preliminary statement?" Autumn looked at Maya first. When Maya gave the slightest nod, Autumn spoke. Not meekly, not dramatically, just truthfully. "I was sitting reading." He approached, made comments about my appearance, then said he wanted to conduct a visual inspection. "I didn't understand until—" Her throat tightened. "He used his baton to lift my skirt. It wasn't random. It was meant to humiliate me." Silence blanketed the space for a moment, heavier than any shout. Then someone behind the crowd whispered, "She's braver than I've ever been." Maya stepped forward again. She faced Brenner and Slater, this time without ceremony. "You're both relieved of active duty pending immediate investigation. Turn over your weapons and badges." Brenner scoffed. "You can't be serious." Fields stepped in, crisp and cool. "It's not a request, officer. It's a directive." "You got no cause?" he barked. But even he could hear the edge of desperation lacing his tone. "You laid hands via baton on a civilian without cause or consent," Maya said. "That's misconduct, harassment, abuse of authority, and a potential civil rights violation, and it happened in public, in front of witnesses during daylight." She took a single step closer. "I've seen people lose their careers over less. You should have known better." Slater, hands shaking, unclipped his badge and gun and passed them over. Brenner didn't move. "I said," Maya repeated, "badge and gun. Now." Finally, with a muttered curse, he yanked them off his belt and shoved them toward Fields. "Cowards," he spat, "turning on your own." Maya's voice dropped, almost gentle. "If your own means the ones who shame the badge, then yes, I'll turn every time." The crowd murmured again, louder this time. People were filming, uploading, streaming. Autumn, who had remained quiet since her testimony, stepped beside Maya and spoke. Not to Brenner, not to the crowd, but to herself, though everyone heard. "I've spent so much of my life being afraid of silence, but today I realized silence isn't safety, it's permission. And I'm done giving it." Maya turned, her gaze softening. "That's your voice," she said. "Don't ever let them take it again." And then something shifted. Subtle, beautiful. A small girl, maybe 8 or 9, slipped through the legs of the adults and handed Autumn a tiny folded paper. Autumn knelt, opened it, scribbled in blue marker, crooked and uneven. "You are strong. I saw it." Autumn smiled, small, tentative, but real. Detective Fields cleared her throat gently. "We'll transport both officers now. Sergeant Williams, IA. Thanks you for your intervention." Maya nodded. "We're not done. This is just the opening statement." As the disgraced officers were led away, one of the older women in the crowd called out, "God bless you, baby," to Autumn. Another shouted, "That's what justice ought to look like." And Maya, she didn't bask. She didn't gloat. She just stood, tall beside the girl she once rescued, now standing on her own. Because this wasn't the end. It was the line in the sand, and they had just crossed it together. The precinct walls were too white, too sterile, clinical like a hospital, but without the compassion. The moment Sergeant Maya Williams stepped through the lobby of the 9th District Station, the temperature dropped. Not literally, but in posture, in silence, in eyes that lingered too long. She was wearing her full uniform now, hair in regulation bun, badge polished, body cam blinking softly. Her presence was not welcomed, and she knew it. They didn't like that she brought one of their own in. They liked even less that she was right. Detective Rowena Fields trailed behind her, carrying a sealed evidence bag that held the confiscated weapons and badges of Officers Brenner and Slater. They passed a bulletin board where the Officer of the Month still bore Brenner's photograph. It would be gone by morning. Captain J.T. Moreland met them outside the interview room. He was in his 60s with a limp from a blown knee in Newark, back in '94, and a tolerance for nonsense that hovered around zero. "Tell me you've got it clean," he said under his breath. Maya's reply was razor-sharp. "We've got video, witnesses, a minor who recorded the aftermath, and a decorated veteran who testified on the spot. It's clean." Moreland let out a slow exhale, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "The union's already blowing up my phone. You just made enemies of half this department." Maya didn't blink. "Then I'll know which half needs watching." He gave her a look. Half. Weary, half respectful, then opened the door to the briefing room. Inside sat 2 desks, one for Slater, empty. He'd asked for time before his initial statement. The other was occupied. Autumn Wade sat across from an IA officer, her posture upright, hands clasped in her lap. She looked like someone older than her years, like someone who'd had to mature in a single afternoon. Maya stepped in and gently cleared her throat. "You okay?" Autumn turned, and this time, when she nodded, there was steel behind it. "I'm ready." The IA officer handed Maya a folder. Inside were transcribed statements, time-stamped photographs, and a copy of the footage from Maya's body cam. "It's enough to open a misconduct investigation without delay," the officer said. "But the district attorney wants more." "More?" Maya arched an eyebrow. "They want a confession. They want a pattern." Maya tapped her finger on the folder. "Then I'll give them one." That afternoon she sat alone in her office combing through old reports. She didn't trust the internal database to flag what needed to be found. So she did it the old way. Paper trails, complaint forms, review boards that couldn't verify testimonies from black and brown women too afraid or too poor to fight back. Then she saw it. Sharon McBride, 2018. Complaint. Inappropriate. Body search by Officer Luke Brenner during routine stop. Closed due to insufficient evidence. She pulled the file, dialed a number she had no business remembering, and waited. "Hello, this is Sergeant Maya Williams. I'm calling regarding a complaint you filed in 2018. The voice on the other end stiffened. "I was told nothing could be done." "Well," Maya said slowly, "the people who told you that didn't have what I have now." Silence. Then, "What do you need?" "Your truth," Maya answered. "And maybe your courage." Back at the station, Slater finally reappeared. Pale, sweaty, like a man crawling out from under guilt. "I didn't touch her," he said, voice shaky. "But I didn't stop him either. I laughed like it was just a joke." Maya looked at him, not with anger, but with a sad kind of clarity. "Do you understand what your silence cost her?" He nodded. "Yes." "Ma'am?" "Then don't waste it. Speak." He did. Everything. The jokes in the locker room. The way Brenner targeted women he thought had no connections. The patterns. The nights they drank after rough calls. He gave names, dates, places. Enough to connect 3 previous complaints and paint a picture no defense attorney could whitewash. By nightfall, Maya stood in front of the City Oversight Committee with a thumb drive in hand and a statement that made the room fall to pins and needles. "Justice doesn't arrive with fanfare," she said. "It arrives because someone refuses to look away." She locked eyes with every member of the board. That someone was a young woman in a public park. She remembered what dignity felt like, and she remembered who once gave it to her. And because she refused to go quiet, We now have a chance to root out not just an offender, but a culture that let him thrive. No one clapped, but no one looked away either. In Palm Hollow, the real work had just begun. The next morning, Palm Hollow buzzed beneath the surface. People didn't shout. They didn't protest, but the whispers had started. At the corner barber shop, old men folded newspapers slower than usual. At the diner, servers paused longer by tables when conversations turned low and serious. And at Miss Clara's laundromat, a place where secrets were rinsed with bleach and softened with dryer sheets, something rare happened. Women started talking. Maya Williams stood just inside the doorway, dressed down in jeans, a fitted coat, and the same steel gaze she wore in uniform. She had come not to interrogate but to listen. And when Sharon McBride arrived, there was a chair waiting and a pot of coffee already hot. Sharon was now 32, short hair, eyes tired but alert. She sat stiffly, hands clenched around a purse with frayed edges. "You sure this ain't just for the press?" she asked, barely looking at Maya. "I don't do press," Maya said. "I do truth, even when it hurts." Sharon's jaw flexed. "They made me feel crazy, like I was exaggerating. Said there was no camera footage. Said I should take it as a compliment." Maya nodded, not interrupting. "It was 5 years ago," Sharon said, voice cracking on the edge of memory. "I was pulled over for a taillight. Brenner said I looked nervous, told me to get out of the car, said he had to search me. Then he put his hands where they didn't belong. I froze like I always do when I'm scared." She wiped at her eye quickly. "I filed a complaint. You know what Internal Affairs told me? Your story doesn't line up with officer behavior." Maya's hands were folded in front of her, still and deliberate. "They told you that because they didn't want the story to be true." Sharon looked up. "Why now? Why are they listening now?" "Because Autumn Wade wouldn't sit down, and because someone else, me, remembered you didn't deserve to be erased." Sharon sat back, exhaled. "You want me to testify?" "I want you to be heard." Silence, then a small nod. "Okay." Later that day, Maya stepped into a cramped records room behind the 9th District station where dust danced like nervous energy. She scanned more files, more whispers on paper, redacted reports, anonymous complaints. Same phrases repeating like rot. Unsubstantiated. Miscommunication. Officer acted within protocol. But the names started repeating, too. Luke Brenner. Luke Brenner. Luke Brenner. She was building not a case, but a pattern. And patterns were harder to dismiss. That evening, she met with Autumn at a quiet tea house run by a Vietnamese couple who called everyone sweetheart and remembered your order after one visit. It was quiet, safe, and wrapped in the smell of jasmine. Autumn sat with her legs folded, hands around a warm mug. She looked tired, but clearer, like someone learning how to breathe without bracing for pain. "There's a girl," Autumn said quietly. "She messaged me after the story broke. Said she was too scared to go to the police, but she remembers Brenner patrolling her school bus stop when she was in middle school. Said he used to ask her if she had a boyfriend." Maya's jaw tightened. "She willing to come forward?" Autumn shook her head. "Not yet. We don't rush them," Maya said, "but we don't let them disappear either." Autumn looked up, and for the first time, her voice held purpose. "Why do they always think silence means safety?" Maya smiled gently. "Because they've never heard what silence sounds like when it breaks." That night, Maya stood in front of a corkboard in her small apartment. Photographs, incident reports, screenshots of text messages from women too afraid to sign their names. And in the center, the word pattern, red yarn, stretched between pins connecting Sharon, Autumn, the bus stop girl, Slater's confession, the veteran's witness. One truth linked them all. Brenner didn't slip. He hunted. And the system, it held. The door opened for him. She took a pushpin, marked the next lead. Then she stood back, eyes fierce. Palm Hollow thought it was whispering, but it had just begun to roar. Palm Hollow's City Hall never felt like a place where truth belonged. With its marble floors and polished brass railings, it seemed more designed to silence voices than amplify them. But that morning, as the council chamber slowly filled, truth came anyway, on quiet feet, in calm voices, through the trembling hands of women who had waited far too long to be believed. Autumn Wade sat near, the front, her back straight despite the tremor in her fingertips. She wasn't here to relive pain. She was here to break a wall, to make sure no one else had to sit where she had sat, alone on that park bench, unsure if anyone would believe what had just happened to her. Beside her, Sharon McBride held her own story like a burning coal, knowing it could finally light something greater than grief. At the far side of the room, Sergeant Maya Williams leaned against the back wall, not as a speaker today, but as a guardian. Her presence was quiet, unshakable. She didn't need to be at the podium. Her work was already woven into the room, into every document submitted, every witness listed, every tape cued to play. The council chairwoman, a black woman in her late 60s named Elaine Brower, adjusted her glasses and called the hearing to order. Her tone was firm, grandmotherly, and tired of excuses. We're here today to review misconduct allegations within the 9th District. This is not a trial, but it is a reckoning. Autumn was the first to speak. Her voice was steady. "He didn't yell," she said. "He didn't use force. That's what made it worse. He smiled. He made it seem like what he did to me was normal." She paused, then added, "I stayed quiet because I didn't think anyone would care. But then Maya showed up, and I remembered that sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it just shows up and refuses to leave." The room was still. Sharon followed. "He pulled me over 5 years ago," she said. "Told me I looked jumpy. Asked me if I was hiding anything under my clothes. Then he made me step out, and he searched me in a way that made me feel like less than a person. I filed a complaint. They said I was exaggerating." Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "I wasn't." Behind her, a woman in a red blouse stood up, then another. And another. "I remember him from the high school," one said. "He used to stand too close. He asked for my number while I was waiting for the bus. I was 13. I didn't come forward because I thought it wouldn't matter." Maya stood now, not to speak, but to place a folder on the council table. Inside, over a dozen affidavits, time-stamped complaints, and a transcribed confession from Officer Slater. Chairwoman Brower looked through it in silence. Then she looked up. "For years," she said, "these halls dismissed patterns as coincidences. That ends today." A murmur of assent swept the room, not loud but full of weight. The kind of sound that means something just shifted. Outside, reporters pressed against the glass. Palm Hollow was listening. After the hearing, Maya walked with Autumn down the front steps. They didn't speak until they reached the sidewalk. "That was brave," Maya said quietly. Autumn shook her head. "No, that was overdue." Maya paused, then asked, "How do you feel?" Autumn looked out over the city, the skyline softened by morning haze, and for the first time in days, maybe years, her answer came with clarity. "Like I'm finally standing in my own name." Maya gave a slow nod. "That's the first crack," she said. "The wall doesn't fall all at once," Autumn finished, "but once it cracks, it doesn't stop." They stood there a moment longer, two women bound, not by blood, but by a shared truth and an unspoken promise. This will never be silenced again. It was the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, not because of weather, but because of what was about to happen. The courthouse in downtown Palm Hollow stood like a monument to old promises, justice carved in stone above its columns, though most people who walked through those doors had long stopped believing it. But today, something different was in the air. Not hope, accountability. Sharper, hungrier. Inside courtroom 3B, every seat was taken. Reporters lined the back wall, notepads open, screens dimmed to silent mode. Survivors sat shoulder to shoulder. Some who had spoken, some who still couldn't, but all here watching. At the defendant's table, Officer Luke Brenner wore a suit instead of his uniform, but the arrogance remained. His tie was straight, his eyes cold, his lawyer overconfident. To him, this was just a storm to wait out, another policy slap on the wrist. But seated at the witness stand was Autumn Wade, hands folded, voice level. "I was reading," she said. "He asked for my ID, and before I could respond, he used his baton to lift my dress." She paused. No dramatics, just truth. He smirked like it was funny, like I didn't matter. The courtroom held its breath. The defense attorney leaned forward. "Miss Wade, did he physically touch you?" "No," Autumn answered clearly. "He didn't need to. What he did was an act of domination, of humiliation. He didn't have to touch skin to leave bruises." A ripple of tension passed through the room, the kind that didn't need a gavel to echo. Next was Sharon McBride, calm and composed in a soft gray sweater. She didn't cry. She didn't falter. "I filed a complaint 5 years ago. They dismissed it, but the truth hasn't changed." The defense objected. "Irrelevant history," the judge overruled. "Pattern is admissible." Slater followed, clean-cut now, nervous, but resolute. "I laughed when it happened," he admitted, "because I didn't know what else to do. I was scared of him, but that doesn't excuse it. I failed to protect her. I failed my badge." The prosecutor, a middle-aged black woman named Reva Langston, closed with firm grace. "This case is not about a single incident," she said. "It's about a man who used his badge to prey on the vulnerable, who believed women without power had no voice, but he was wrong. And today you, the jury, have a chance to prove it." Brenner never took the stand. His lawyer advised against it because even he knew the mask was already cracking. As the jury deliberated, Maya Williams sat with Autumn in the waiting room just outside. No uniforms, no media, just two women and the buzz of vending machines in the distance. "You did everything right," Maya said softly. Autumn stared ahead. "I don't feel brave." "Bravery isn't about how you feel," Maya replied. "It's about what you do when you're afraid." Autumn let out a long breath. "What if they let him go?" Maya didn't sugarcoat. "They might, but even if they do, the silence around him is gone. He'll never hide in the shadows again." The door opened. Everyone rose as the jury returned. 12 faces, a paper handed to the bailiff. Passed to the judge. She read it aloud. On the charge of misconduct under color of authority, guilty. On the charge of harassment with intent to degrade, guilty. On the charge of abuse of power, guilty. Autumn didn't react, not right away. Her hands simply unclenched, fingers relaxing, as if they'd been holding breath for years. Brenner didn't look at her. He didn't have the spine, but Maya did. She looked directly at him as he was cuffed, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to Autumn. "You stood," she said quietly, and the world moved. Outside the courthouse, the sky had turned gold. Not triumph, not celebration, just light, and it was enough. The sound of the cuffs wasn't loud. It was the absence of protest, the silence of a man who realized the performance was over, that spoke volumes. Officer Luke Brenner, once the untouchable face of the 9th District, now walked out of courtroom 3B with his wrists shackled and his gaze hollow. The reporters swarmed outside like gulls sensing the scent of rot. But he didn't speak. His pride had vanished long before the verdict was read. Inside, the room remained suspended in something too heavy to be called relief. Not joy, not triumph, just release. Autumn Wade sat back in her chair, breathing slow and deep like someone adjusting to a new kind of air. Her hand clutched the folded note from the little girl in the red dress, the one who had watched her testify 2 days ago, scribbled in marker. "You're the reason I believe girls can be brave." Maya Williams stood near the exit, arms folded, face unreadable. She'd seen convictions before. She'd seen guilty men walk. But this one hit different. Not because it was rare, but because it had required ordinary people to do extraordinary things just to make truth visible. Next to her, Detective Rowena Fields removed her glasses and whispered, 18 months. You think it's enough? Maya didn't flinch. It's not about the time, it's about the stain. His badge won't ever shine again. Outside, Officer Jim Slater exited a separate side door, accompanied by Internal Affairs. He had taken a plea: suspended sentence, demotion, permanent removal from patrol duty and mandatory testimony in future misconduct cases. Some called it a deal. Others called it justice with teeth dulled down. Slater stopped as he passed Maya. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly. But I hope what I said helped. Maya studied him, her expression neither cold nor forgiving, just real. You didn't save her, she said, but you stopped lying. That's a start. He nodded and walked away. Later that evening, Maya and Autumn returned to the park, not for ceremony, not for symbolism, just because the place where it began deserved to be seen in a new light. They walked slowly past the bench where it had happened. Autumn traced the worn wooden armrest with her fingertips. There was still a small mark on the planks from where her book had fallen, weathered now like the memory itself. You ever think it would end like this? Autumn asked. No, Maya replied. But I never thought you'd be the one to finish it either. Autumn gave a soft, dry laugh. Neither did I. She sat down, not carefully this time, but confidently. She looked up at Maya, eyes steady. Can I tell you something strange? Maya nodded. I don't feel angry anymore, Autumn said. I thought I would, but